of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, toward the end of his life, legendary journalist and America's most trusted name in news, Walter Cronkite, said, "I think it is absolutely essential in a democracy to have competition in the media, a lot of competition, and we seem to be moving away from that." Over a decade since his death, we can agree that his warning was an extreme understatement. The harm that anti-competitive practices of technology platforms like Facebook and Google sometimes feel very abstract, but the value of a free and diverse press, especially local news media, has a very tangible impact on our lives and on our communities. Local investigative journalism can root out corruption, bring attention to issues that matter in our communities, but that don't and will never attract national attention. In the 3 years since the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, we saw the story fade from national headlines, but local outlets like the South Florida Sun-Sentinel were exhaustively investigating the failures that contributed to that awful day, important work that was recognized with the Pulitzer Prize. And our community has worked in our shared grief to keep alive the memory of the 17 we lost that day, their hobbies, their passions, their character. And it's the work of the Sun-Sentinel and the Palm Beach Post, the Miami Herald, the local broadcasters, other local news media that's been an important part of telling these stories and demanding accountability. On the other hand, Facebook, Google, other technology platforms played an instrumental role in spreading misinformation and conspiracy theories about the tragic event that day and many others. And I've asked Google and Facebook and Twitter in hearings before the Judiciary Committee why they keep giving not just a platform, but a megaphone to people who spread lies about the shooting in my district, to people who target children, the survivors, and their families. And we need more responsible, high-quality journalism and fewer monetized megaphones that some use to attempt to destroy lives. Mr. Shavern, how do we rebalance the scale? What are the main components of making online platforms take more responsibility for the content they carry and of leveling the playing field between news publishers and online platforms so that high quality content gets elevated over conspiracies and misinformation?
Great. Thank you very much, Congressman. Two things. I agree with you, by the way. We want competition in the news media, but we currently have a market that suppresses it. It makes it impossible to develop new entrants and competitive voices, new diverse voices. If you were going to build a new entrant in local news, you're facing a marketplace dominated by two companies that suppresses the value of that content, makes it impossible to have new entrants. Secondly, specifically to your point, I have talked in other contexts about the role that Section 230 plays in the ecosystem. And in particular, the platform's role in amplifying content, the choices the platforms make to decide what gets seen and what doesn't get seen. Too often, I think the discussion is about whether a particular piece of content should be labeled or moderated or taken down. And that avoids the question about what the platforms do, the choices they make, and the responsibilities they should have about the choices they make. So I would say two things. One, we need a fair capacity for news publishers to improve the market for quality news content. And we have to look at the responsibilities that the platform should have for their decisions about amplifying content.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Shavern. Ms. Barr, I mentioned the harm to communities and the harm to individuals who are the targets of lies, but your testimony raised a good point about the damage posed to responsible news outlets with the placement of responsible journalism alongside these kinds of lies. Can you just elaborate on the challenges that it poses to your business?
Yes, thank you very much, Congressman. Look, what happens is we put our stories online, and I can tell you that roughly 60 to 70% of what we put out there is referred back to us either by Google or Facebook. So when those stories sit online adjacent to stories that might be misinformation or outright lies, clickbait, whatever you might want to call it, it literally diminishes our reputation and makes people distrust or causes some distrust. So we then spend a lot of time trying to ensure that our viewers and our users understand that we've researched, we have trained journalists, we know what it is we're trying to say, and we have to also then go back and look at the stories that are incorrect and make sure they understand that those aren't, believable. But it's really difficult because, as we all know, a lie goes around the world very quickly.
Thanks, Ms. Barr. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this important hearing. And thanks to all of the witnesses. The testimony of every one of you is really helpful and instructive. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Bentz.